All right, now that I've completed my basic SVG loader animation, I'm going to have some fun and just style the rest of my uh, SVG splash page just for fun. Again, this part's totally optional for your project, but I encourage you to challenge yourself with it if you have the time. So what I'm going to do is I need to create this nice gradient background, add my background texture, and then I'm going to add my title here. So to start, I need to get my background texture. So I'm going to go, I've created it here. I've created this icon texture in Illustrator. You see it here. It's all in white, so you can't really see it, but I'm just going to export this as an SVG. Wrong shortcut. I'm going to export it, and I'm going to drop it into my www. I'm going to add an images folder, and then I'm going to drop that right in there, call it icon pattern. I'm going to export it again as an SVG. And then now that I've got that, I'm going to call it in my CSS. So I'm going to remove this background color. And instead, I'm going to use just a background image. Background image. And we actually have the opportunity to put in more than one background image, which is how we're going to layer our texture and our gradient on top of each other. So to start, we'll put our URL and we'll call in that image. So dot dot to go back out of directory because we need to come out of our CSS and then go into our images folder. And then I'm going to come and call in that icon pattern dot svg. That's our first. So then I'm going to add a comma, new line, and then I'm going to create a linear gradient. And then I'm going to put the angle of my gradient to 35 degrees. And then I'm going to add my first color stop, which is this neon green color here. Oh, forgot a number. Comma, and then my second color stop. This nice turquoise. And then we'll save that and we'll take a look at how that begins. We're probably going to need to add a bit more CSS. So that actually looks pretty good. I've got the gradient and I got my texture here. So I'm just going to double check. I'm just going to add a few more properties to this. I'm going to add a background position to this. Position, and it's going to be center, so everything's nicely centered. I'm going to do a background size. I'm going to go cover so that it fully covers my entire background. And then I'm going to do a background repeat, and I'm going to put no repeat just so that it only does my gradient and my texture once. So then we come that, and then that looks pretty good. Up next now, I'm going to add my title. So to do that, we're going to come back to our code, and we're going to add actually a bit to our HTML. So I'm going to add an H1 here with my title, which is game plan. And then if you look at my reference, I actually have two different colors here. So I'm going to separate this word with a span so that I can style the second half of the word as a different color. And then, so if I just do this, we'll see when we go at, wrong one, they actually get put beside each other. I want them to continue to be stacked. So I'm going to actually wrap this in a div that I'm going to call loader wrap. This will just wrap everything up nicely and then allow the display flex to center the entire div instead of the individual items here. So now when we refresh this, they'll nicely be stacked here. I've chosen a different font for mine. So I'm just going to go to Adobe Fonts and get that font. So I can do that quickly. Or sorry, I'm going to go to Google Fonts for this one. And the font I'm using for this is called Conforta. I'm going to grab just the weight I want. I just need bold. I'm going to select it, and then I'm going to choose to embed it, copy this embed link. If you want to learn more about embedding fonts, or feel free to ask me in class. I'm happy to go over how that works. Embed my font so it can be called in, and then I'm going to add some styling to it. So I've loaded it in, but now I need to style it. So I'm going to come into my CSS here. I'm going to add some CSS at the bottom. And I'm going to do some styling here. So let's go style my H1. So first I'm going to style my font family here. And I'm going to pick that Conforta, sans serif. I'm going to make sure it's bold, so font weight bold. And I'm going to make the color white. And then I'm going to text line center. And then I'm going to increase the font size to 3.5 rem. Let's take a look at how that looks. Oh, that looks pretty good, except for my Conforta is not coming through because I misspelled it. There we go, Conforta is looking good. However, now that has my icon off not quite centered because the width of this div is centering based on this, and then the SVG isn't centering within my my div here. So I'm going to add some more styling to my actual SVG here. So my icon crown here, I'm just going to add a display of block, and I'm going to use some margin to center it. So 0 margin on the top, and then auto on either side, and then that should nicely center it in the middle for me. Looking good. And now I'm just going to add my dark blue to the span of my H1. So H1 span, because I want to target the span inside my H1. And then I'll just grab the color and drop it in. So now I've got my title in here, and I've got it all looking good. So this looks great at this screen size, but if we actually take a look at my initial design for my screen sizes, we see that at different screen sizes, the title actually disappears and the size of my icon changes a little bit. So let's add a little bit more CSS to make that happen. So I'm going to use a couple media queries to make that happen. So if we notice at smaller screen sizes, that title disappears and then will reappear at a larger screen size. So I'm going to go back to my CSS here. I'm actually going to start by putting a display none on my title. So that's going to remove it. And then when I get to a bigger screen size, I'm going to have it come back in. So I'm going to use a media query here. And I'm going to put, I like to use min width media queries personally. So I'm going to put a min width at, say, 38 rem. That's probably a good size. And then I'm just going to have it come back in. So now if we take a look at a big screen size, it's here. But if we shrink down, it's going to disappear on us, which looks pretty good. I'm getting some weird lag on my browser here. So sorry about that, my browser froze. It's all fixed now. Okay, so if we bring it down, see it disappears, and then we bring it up, it looks pretty good. So one thing I don't like is when I get on smaller screen sizes, this feels a little tight and feels like it's not quite shrinking to a good size that works for me. So I'm going to add actually a few more width and height restrictions to my icon here. So currently, if we look at my icon, I just have a width of 15 rem. What I'm going to do is I'm also going to add a max width to it. So that will basically, for most screen sizes, it'll stay to the nice 15 rem, but in different areas, it will shrink down if it needs to. So I'm going to do a max width of 40 VW. So it can't be any bigger than 40% essentially of my screen width. So I'm going to add that in. So then if we take a look at the big screen size, nothing changes. But we see as we go down, it actually now starts shrinking with my screen width a little bit earlier, which I think looks a little bit nicer and keeps it a bit centered a bit and feeling a bit more appropriate for that screen size. So if we come in and we take a look at some different screen sizes, you know, our iPhone, our Pixel or our iPhone X, you know, it looks pretty good and pretty appropriate for that size. But then still at our bigger sizes, it looks nice and is sitting in there. So that's how I would approach the rest of it. Again, this step is totally optional within your project. I just think it's fun, so I would encourage you to give it a shot if you want to challenge yourself. Good luck with the rest of your project. I am excited to see them.